think that's all working. So I've got week 2 of the Look at the Masters project, and I thought I'd use the 2 demos that I started last week and just move them on a little bit further. So I use these to sort of demonstrate a few techniques. And then next week, perhaps, I'll think of something else to demo, maybe impressionism. So this one from the Rembrandt image. So from last week, just did some underpainting, just kind of starting with a tone ground, wiped back, and then painted the darks in. And then what's the, some of the old masters did would they then build up with layers of glazes, really, so sort of thin layers, transparent layers, mostly transparent, so you could see some of the colours glowing through. And it's a nice way of getting a little bit of depth. So we'd need some sort of medium. Glazed mediums quite often have a bit of varnish in them, but it's usually like something like linseed oil and a bit of varnish and some solvent. So I'm approximating that for the water mixable oils with just a little bit of the water mixable medium or oil and a little bit of water just to thin it down a little bit, make it thinner. So it could be, both the lighter skin tone. So I mixed a little bit of a skin tone using some crimson and some yellow ochre and a little bit of white, but I'd quite like to keep it a little bit transparent, and then a tiny bit of medium. So I should be able to just sort of put some of this on, and hopefully, I like the idea of trying to put that on quite thinly so that some of the colour underneath glows through. And again, a little bit on the highlights here, but soften those edges out there. Let's go a little bit redder around there. And quite often they're not sharp edges, they're quite softened edges. So that's where it's not quite nice with the oils. You can put some paint down, soften edges out. Into the shadows, just get another brush for the shadow areas. So I've mixed a dark here, just with a little bit of black and some medium, tiny bit of water. So these sort of darker areas, again, these will really sort of, again, putting that on fairly thinly so that some colours glow through. So it's a slightly bigger brush. And part of the reason they worked in this way is that you use less paint, so building up coverage. And because they would have made their own paint, they would have pigments that they grind up. It's a more economical way of building a painting up. That could be something like that. Another technique, as well as just kind of painting on thin strokes, would be scumbling, where you kind of putting the paint on and just kind of working it into the surface in a kind of more random sort of way. So that's another technique, and that could be thicker actually. You could use sort of thicker paint for that. It's a little bit, something a bit like that is kind of working. And that will give a slightly different effect, but again, you're seeing some of the colour from underneath. So perhaps leave that one at that for the minute. The one on the other side is the Turner one we're looking at. I was looking at, which was, so again, I've done a little bit more of this. Basically got all the underpainting in, and I finished that at home, and then I started to work some of the sky colours in. So this bit and this bit I've started to work in. So perhaps add a little bit of blues down here, and I'll use a little bit of a greeny blue. So this is Prussian blue, slightly greeny blue, which I've got a feeling you might have used. Prussian blue. I think that would have been around then. and a little bit white mixed in. So just looking at this area here. And one of the nice things about canvas, as you probably know, is that you can then work the paint into the weave of the canvas, and this is a nice way of softening out the textures or softening out the brushwork. So, I mean, a lot of my paintings I tend to paint on boards because they tend to be quite sharp details and structures and things like that. But actually, for things like seascapes, sky paintings, it can be quite nice to just work the painting in and then work the painting into the weave of the canvas and just sort of soften areas out like that. These areas here, I think that's where he's probably used thicker paint and used a palette knife. So I did a little bit of this on Tuesday and that's dry. So the idea there is, and I'll just add a little bit down the bottom here, on the right knife, whatever knife. Let's make a slightly pinky colour. So we use a little bit of red and some white. That's the other red as well. Got that one. I'll just use that one. And then he's kind of put the paint on and go a little bit lighter just so you can see it. Yeah, there's quite a sort of textured sort of impasto mark. So there's a mixture of, areas where you soften paint out and then areas where you put quite thick textural paint on. So something probably along those lines. And then what both Turner and Rembrandt did was they'd let that dry and then they put thinner glazes over the top. Put a few more bits down there. I think this is dry enough to put some more paint on the top there. So let's just go just slightly darker. And a bit of an experiment. So again, using the medium. Kind of working that in. Gives the impression of those, you get a sort of transparent, a sort of glow coming through there. I think it's working better perhaps there.
Paul, did you say that the glaze, the medium, that's like a varnish or glaze?
Yeah, well, it keeps it slightly shiny. Yeah. I mean, linseed oil would do the same. I think if when they added a bit of varnish in, it makes it even glassier, even shinier.
I've got some medium, but I've never ever used it.
Yeah, so that's one way of, and that is starting to approach something a little bit like that. And it will look quite different from, so what we'll do, I'll wipe that back a little bit, just so we've just got a little bit poking through. When we look at the Impressionists, they worked in a very different way, and they put the paint on, really just mixed it in almost like one layer. And the paint tends to look more opaque, whereas this can give you a little bit of depth, more of a glowing feel to the paintings. So when you go into the places like the National Gallery, you'll see all the paintings, the old masters do have this kind of glow to them, where they've used thin layers of paint, some darks over lighter areas. So it's quite a nice thing to experiment with. And you may have done that all over here, and then probably things like these details like the masts, that would be perhaps thin paint, small brushes, and just pop that over the top once all this is dry. A couple of different ways of working. Any questions? What's that?
It's a little bit advanced for me.
Bit advanced, yeah, perhaps so. You can practice it on a small scale. Do a little bit of sky or something. Anyway, something to experiment with.
Yeah, thank you.